Leading a tour through Jerusalem's Holocaust memorial Yad Vashem is always special for Jonathan Matthews. Today, the young Israeli researcher is guiding a group of Israeli school children. With its monumental architecture and powerful exhibition, it's a place like no other to learn about the Shoah.
Generally speaking, the whole concept of telling the story in this museum and perhaps connecting different generations to the story of the Holocaust is by focusing on the victim. And when I say focusing on the victim, we have naturally historical information in the museum, but we also have personal artifacts and video testimonies of survivors.
The individual stories of the victims are an essential part of the museum, making the horrors of the Shoah tangible. Over 75 years later, the increasingly elderly survivors are slowly disappearing. That poses a challenge. With the museum, educational programs, its comprehensive archive, and a large collection of documents, Yad Vashem aims to keep the victims' memories alive. The exhibition also deals with the Nazis' rise to power, totalitarian regimes, and anti-Semitism, an issue that's just as relevant today.
This is a topic that worries me, anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and this is one of the reasons I believe that it's important for me to work here as an individual, but also I think it demands more active involvement of different governments in the world to deal with this problem.
The Hall of Names. Many victims never left a trace, never had a headstone or a grave. It's a memorial for all of the 6 million murdered Jews. Young Israelis often learn about the Holocaust through their own family histories, annual memorial services and school. From the age of 16, school groups usually go to Yad Vashem. But a visit like this is never easy.
It's my first time here, and when I walked in, it was overwhelming and difficult to see. You feel their suffering, what they went through. You can see and hear many artifacts from that period, and it's really tough for me.
I think it's very important to conserve this, because people need to know what happened, and to prevent this from happening in the future again, and to show that even in hard times there were people who kept up their hopes and helped others and tried to survive.
Yad Vashem, a place to reflect on what happened over 75 years ago, and a commitment to keeping that memory alive for generations to come.
So Roseanne and Michal are still with me. Roseanne, we saw what they're doing in Israel, trying to keep the memory alive for young generations. Have you yourself been to Yad Vashem?
Yes, of course.
And what was it like?
It's a mandatory stop for every elementary school kid in Israel. Well, not before 13, 14, but yes, everybody goes there. It's a very, Yad Vashem stands for Yad, which is a hand, and a name, Shem, for each and every of the fallen 6 million victims. So it's just part of it's sort of the end point of a long engagement with that as a student in Israel. Of course, we have also the annual Memorial Day where there's a moment of silence mentioned by sirens in Israel, where you stop and you take the time to think and connect with that. Israel has managed throughout the years to make the Holocaust and the stories of the victims accessible to very young children from very young age in very communicative ways. If it's Anne Frank, if it's, and further on into the details and stories of kids throughout the Holocaust as you are young, but then as you grow up further into the stories of what happened and understanding more of the historical meaning of what happened there. So this is something quite strong within Israeli narrative as you grow up. It's a part of it's part of who you are and part of your upbringing.
And Michela, what was it for you like growing up here in Germany? Were you taught about the Holocaust and all the horrors that took place during the Nazi regime while you were at school?
Yes, this was an integral part of my schooling in West Germany, although in East Germany it was somewhat a different picture from what I've learned since, and clearly an awareness was being created of the historical responsibility. But I'd also like to come back to something that Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the German president, said, that one shouldn't forget the individuals behind those very large numbers. More than 1 million people died in Auschwitz alone, and today, I'm a mother myself, and I struggle to explain to a youngster, and we saw those youngsters in that report there, not just the magnitude of what happened, but that children were killed there, that humans can do something like that to each other. And that's a very individual experience for everyone to let sink in and to understand. And those very few survivors we still have now are telling us that they are seeing signs again that something like this could be possible, that that's how it all started. Looking at the signs of anti-Semitism in Europe, that is something that really should not just let leaders listen up, but everybody in their own society.